Welcome, lovely chosen ones. If you gaze long enough at the chosen one, she will begin to read your back. Let it sink in. They didn't merely send personnel to monitor you. They hired them, recruited and assigned, paid, give them instructions and dossiers, probably even coffee and motivational lectures. But one by one, they all returned, stating the same uncomfortable thing. I'm not sure what I just observed, but it wasn't typical. Here's where things get crazy. Based on a psychological surveillance audit. Yes, it is a thing. More than half of trackers assigned to watch high-vibration persons requested reassignment within 6 months, claiming spiritual discomfort, emotional disturbance, and my personal favorite, inexplicable feelings. Imagine being so magnificently intricate that spies experience existential agony. They assumed you were just someone with influence. They had no idea they were monitoring someone with divine clearance, cosmic algorithms, and energy that did not follow worldly norms. So it has now become a trend. They recruit fresh individuals to follow you. They send them in, smug and assured, with clipboards in hand. But each one returns, disoriented, blinking slowly, mumbling that one isn't like the others. So brace up, because in this video, we'll explain why they keep attempting to monitor you and why every single person they send confirms what you already know. You are not only being watched, you are being studied, and they still haven't figured you out. Let's get to it. Number 1, the energy is not human. It isn't even from here. They assumed you were simply another name on a list. A name, an assignment, and maybe a target. They expected to discover drama, a flaw, or something sensational to report on. But they came quite close to you. They couldn't articulate how they felt. Something about your presence disturbed them in ways they couldn't articulate. It wasn't terror, precisely. It was not even intimidating. It was something deeper. They couldn't classify, investigate, or confine it. And that's when they saw your energy didn't seem human. Not in the ordinary day-to-day sense. Not in the way that most individuals emit urgent, predictable frequencies. Yours seemed inaccessible, archaic, and out of place in this world. It seemed like something that shouldn't be confined in a human body. This was the first red flag for them. They have seen strong people before. Charismatic influencers, ruthless leaders, and deceptive charmers. However, the items you carry do not fit within any of those categories. Your spirit is still, like if it's from another planet. A strength that is not derived from effort or plan, but from alignment. And as they continued to observe, they realized they weren't viewing a human. They were observing something transmitted. No amount of spying could break your coding. You moved in ways that contradicted rationality. Your decisions did not reflect fear, ego, or even self-preservation. You strolled as if you'd already seen the conclusion of the narrative and returned just to perform your part with elegance. They could not trap you, irritate you, or read you. Every effort to control the story failed because they were unable to absorb spiritual power. And you got it. They went in intending to get information. They emerged doubting reality. You did not raise your voice. You did not demonstrate your strength. You simply were. And that creature of yours had such a high frequency that it interfered with their neural systems. The apparatus malfunctioned. The air felt thicker. The room became quieter. What should you do if the person you're following makes you feel like you're being exposed? Simple. You report back on what they all end up saying. What about this one? Yeah, this one is not from here. Number 2. They assumed you'd be easy to examine, but you exposed them. They entered believing they were in command. Clipboard in hand, eyes wide open, observing your every movement. You were the mission. They were meant to study. You track your behaviors, search for trends, and report back. Easy. That's how it works for everyone else. But something went wrong, or well, depending on your perspective. Because instead of you being the one being investigated, they gradually became the ones in the limelight. And not because you exposed them on purpose, but because your energy was too pure for their filth to hide in. What they didn't anticipate was that just being in your presence would begin to disclose the things they'd been attempting to repress in themselves, in your silence. Their own roar became louder in your silence. Their inner instability began to shake. They approached with judgment in their eyes. However, they were forced to confront their own hypocrisy. You didn't need to call anything out. Your entire presence served as a mirror, and for the most part, what they saw in the reflection made them uncomfortable. They immediately recognized you weren't responding like other people. You were not attempting to impress them, prove yourself, or protect your reputation. You spared them the emotional turmoil. They were taught what to look for. You did not accept the bait, and this upset them. They could not read. You couldn't be trapped in a tale. Instead, they ended up getting rid. You began to see the flaws in their tale, the false tone in their voice, the minor hesitations, and the veiled shame in their eyes. You captured it all without saying anything. The more closely they observed you, the more they felt they were being watched. It was as if you could see through the disguise, past the badge, and transform the agenda into something tangible. And it worried them, not because you exposed them to the outside world, but because they couldn't escape themselves while they were around you. They were assigned to gather evidence about you, but the true proof they discovered was what they had hidden inside themselves. When the expedition concluded, they did not return with a case file. They departed with questions they hadn't expected to ask, and that's how you reversed the whole assignment without moving a finger. Number 3, they discovered no soil, just depth. They arrived prepared to dig, to unearth skeletons in your closet, to reveal a parallel life or some hidden drama. Because, let's be honest, most folks own something. A weak area, a murky time, or a falsehood. They've told us too many times. That is what they hope to discover with you. Something to pin upon you. Something untidy, humiliating. That would explain why others are terrified by your presence. But instead of dirt, they kept running into something unexpected. Depth, not just surface-level goodwill or fake generosity, but genuine depth. Scars, healed wounds, and spiritual discipline form the foundation of this sort. They continued attempting to get a response. But you did not flinch. They followed you around, hunting for rumor. But you offered them steadiness. They kept track of your behaviors. But everything checked out. There is no hidden turmoil or mystery. A double existence, just peace patterns, purpose, and self-control troubled them more than any scandal could. Because controversy is foreseeable, messy individuals are easily classified. However, when someone lives in alignment, they walk and speak. It shocks the whole system. You made them uncomfortable because you weren't playing the game, and when they couldn't find anything to use against you, they experienced a new level of irritation. Respect the type that grinds on those hired to find fault. It became a quiet acknowledgement that they had underestimated you. They suspected you were faking the light you carried. They imagined there was a mask to tear off. However, the more they looked, the more they had to concede. It is not a mask. It's just who you are. And the reality bothered them because it meant they couldn't let you down. It meant that whatever they said about you being too much or too spiritual was a projection. They came for the soil. They were perplexed by how pure your energy actually is. And this is the scariest part for them. They recognize that your power is not derived from perfection. It stems from alignment. And there is no report they can provide to justify this. So they go back and say, the only thing that makes sense. There is nothing here except truth, and a lot more of it than we are used to. Number 4, they learned that you cannot be bribed, lured, or broken. They repeatedly tested you. They started with flattery, covert praise, and phony support. They hoped you'd be drawn to the enticing prospects they presented. They imagined everyone had a reward. Some type of recognition, access, prestige, or money would cause them to bend. But you did not bite. You saw through it. You did not seek attention, did not seek acceptance, and did not fall into the trap. That alone conveyed a signal that they were not prepared for. This one moves differently. So they changed their strategy. If they couldn't purchase you, they may try to bait you, incite drama, cause disorder, press buttons, disseminate stories, or trigger your trauma. They wanted a response. Anger and terror are two emotions that might be used to tell a tale. But instead of responding, you backed off. You remained motionless. You let the storm pass while they messed about in bewilderment. They couldn't comprehend how you remained calm. It was not a weakness. It was about discipline. You conquered yourself, which made you dangerous. Then they tried pressure and heat, hoping you'd crack. Isolation, criticism, and resistance from every point. The majority of individuals fall into such category. But you didn't. You maintained your form. You continued showing up with honesty. You did not protect your name in each chamber. It defended itself. You had nothing to prove, and they had nothing to take. That's when it struck them. They were dealing with someone who was not motivated by ego at all. The system is not designed to accommodate folks like you. It is designed to control, manipulate, and distract. However, none of their normal tools worked on you. You were focused on something greater. You were not after power. You were strolling through it. That resulted in a fault in their programming. There was a mistake in their formula. Someone who cannot be enticed, ensnared, or broken. You weren't invulnerable because you had barriers. You were untouchable because you have clarity, purpose, and alignment. And they recognized with increasing concern that you are the kind of person they cannot rule since your spirit does not respond to their systems. It answers to something considerably bigger, over which they have no influence. Number 5, you do not fit any psychological profile. They are aware that they arrived with their labels. Ready, narcissist, empath, victim, rebel. They are accustomed to placing individuals in boxes. It makes control easy. It gives them a false feeling of power when they believe they have figured out someone. So when they were assigned to monitor you, they figured it would be ordinary. Several observations here and there. Then they'd add a category and go on. But you did not fit. Every time they thought they had it figured out, you disproved it. Effortless. You weren't extremely reacting, so they couldn't label you emotionally unstable. You were not chilly, either. You were warm, but not needy. You demonstrated compassion without being foolish. You told the truth, but not to be loved. You listened carefully, but did not absorb others' problems. They found it puzzling. They're used to individuals playing roles. They are not used to someone who is merely emotionally intelligent. People are often simple to read. There is a rhythm to their limits, empathy, and tone. However, your energy does not follow traditional emotional signs. You weren't excessively accessible yet. You weren't reserved or proud. However, you handled yourself with unabashed dignity. The inconsistency upset them. They couldn't classify you as a kind man, a healer, a survivor, or any of the other common preconceptions they rely on. It was like attempting to categorize air. What made things worse for them was your spiritual clarity. You weren't preaching or promoting any particular views, yet you exuded certainty. That realization made them uncomfortable because it revealed how lost most people really are. You did not gloat about getting picked. You moved like someone who had gone through hell. They've been stripped of their illusions, reconstructed with reality, and now walk as if they've already read the last chapter. They understood they weren't just seeing a human. They were dealing with somebody that seemed more like an outlier, like someone who had slid through the seams of every institution meant to mold, break, or define individuals. You did not fit into any of the psychological frameworks they had examined since you were not fashioned by this reality. That terrified them more than anything else since you didn't just escape their boxes. You made the boxes seem tiny. Number 6. Your life has divine intervention. They took note. They believed they'd cornered you. Everything was lined up. Timing, pressure, and setup. It should have worked for anybody else. It would have been a certain takedown. But with you, nothing goes as planned. Every time they try to pull the strings behind the scenes, the proof they are certain they have goes missing. Cameras that were intended to capture everything either malfunction, shut off, or inexplicably erase persons they paid to turn against you, eventually switching sides or falling quiet. It's like something where someone keeps jumping in just before the ultimate blow. At first, they dismissed it as a coincidence. Technical errors and human error. However, this occurred repeatedly. Patterns they couldn't ignore. Every trap they laid resulted in something they couldn't control. It's not pure luck. It's not smart. It is something else. You're not just being protected. You're covered. They began to notice the timing, the items that appeared for you at the same time they attempted to attack you. People who speak out unexpectedly, papers that appear out of nowhere, and the way doors open for you despite their best efforts to close them. Even when you go through times of loneliness, grief, or quiet, you always emerge stronger, cleaner, and more exalted. That is not typical. That is not explainable. And it disturbs them. They've encountered individuals with power, influence, and money. But what you're carrying isn't about that. It is spiritual. It is impenetrable. It does not react to their threats or methods. And now they're wondering whether going after you is a costly mistake, since every attempt they make against you backfires. And the more they strive, the more they reveal themselves. Some of them have even backed away totally, not because they suddenly appreciate you, but because they are afraid. They don't want to confess it, but deep down they know it. Something wonderful is looking over you, something that does not focus on you. Now, instead of following you, they are speaking about you, not with curiosity, but with prudence. Seventh, every spy they send is either modified or suppressed. They always send the confident ones, the pros, the ones who believe they've seen everything, educated in manipulation, deceit, and data collecting. They are informed it is simply another task. Follow you, observe, record your habits, and report back. But something changes the instant they enter your area. It is no longer about you. It becomes about them because your presence brings everything to the surface that was previously hidden. They first believe it is mental tiredness, but then things start to go bizarre. Their emotions get louder. They begin to rethink their own views, and long-buried memories resurface. The things they thought they'd dulled out start to return, and no matter how detached they try to be, something about you makes them feel vulnerable, as if you see more than they do. You never say anything, yet they feel understood. Some of them leave the assignment feeling bewildered and unsettled. They can't describe it, but they know something has changed inside them. Their desire for manipulation diminishes. The arrogance fractures. They begin to have bizarre dreams, visions that keep people up at night. They are unable to shake this emotion. They were dispatched to keep an eye on you, but instead were spiritually assaulted. And it is not what they were trained for. Others dig deeper. They oppose the transition. They press harder. However, the more they attempt to spy on you, the more their own lives collapse. Relationships start to break apart. Health concerns arise. Technology fails them. Their thoughts grow fuzzy. It's like your energy short-circuits their systems. Some are reassigned without explanation. Others fall utterly quiet. Fear, rather than professionalism, drove her actions. They are afraid of what they have witnessed. They were afraid of their feelings. Fear of what they can undo now. The uncommon handful, however, are entirely transformed. They came to spy, but they departed with a new understanding, spiritual humility, and personal awakening. They may never confess it aloud, but you shook something free in them that they had no idea was locked. Because following a chosen one is not a typical profession. It is an encounter. Those who endure it seldom return the same. Some are silenced, while others undergo transformations. However, all of them mark number 8. They realize that you are not responding, but reading. They came in and waited for you to crack. They anticipated you'd feel defensive, worried, and maybe even frantic to explain yourself. But instead of responding, you remained calm, silent, and focused. And the quiet was not passive. It was surgical. You were not frozen. You were analyzing, reading, energy, monitoring, body language, picking up tone, timing, discrepancies, and hesitancy, all of which most people miss. They had no idea they were walking into a room with someone who had previously assessed the issue before they talked. You were not bewildered by their presence. You already understood why they were there. You could feel the change in vibe before they even introduced themselves. And although they attempted to quantify your conduct, you were 3 steps ahead, analyzing theirs. Every gaze, pause, and phony grin. It was all data to you, and you gathered it without effort. They were uneasy because you were not providing what they were used to. When faced with pressure, most individuals strive to defend themselves, overshare, or seek praise. But you did not move emotionally. You moved intuitively. And since you weren't following their rules, it threw off the whole game. You weren't attempting to endure their system. You exposed it without saying a word. What surprised them the most was your accuracy without access to their files or background. You uncovered reasons they believed were concealed. You felt agendas. You guessed the following movements before they occurred. All of this without conflict. That level of knowledge made them uneasy because, in their perspective, more information equals control. But you had something they couldn't duplicate: spiritual discernment. You didn't require proof. You didn't need evidence. Knowing was plenty. And recognizing peers through their masks, tails, and authority. Suddenly, they lost control. They were being observed, studied, and unraveled, not by technology or monitoring methods, but by a frequency that they were unable to protect against. They anticipated pandemonium. However, what they got was accuracy, and it scared them, because when someone does not respond as expected, it indicates that they see more than you do. And in your situation, they discovered something terrifyingly true. You were not the one being researched. They were ranked 9th. They keep coming back because you are a walking contradiction. They can't figure you out, and it's driving them insane. Every time they think they've pinned you down, something about you defies their idea. You're not loud, yet your presence alters the overall vibe. You're soft-spoken, yet your words have an effect that lasts long after you're gone. You are kind, but you do not accept foolishness. You are both personable and impenetrable. That inconsistency renders you unintelligible to folks who are taught to depend on patterns. They want to think you're all light or all shade, but you're really a combination of the two. You are capable of intense love, yet you will walk away without hesitation if it means safeguarding your peace. You forgive but never forget. You are tranquil, but no one in their right mind wants to witness what happens if you are pushed too hard. That worries them because they can't foresee how you'll react. You do not burst. You do not pursue. You decide, and your decisions are not based on impulse. They originate from alignment. Their databases aren't sure what to do with someone like you. Behavior models and algorithmic psychology profiles. They all fail. Why? Because you do not function from ego trauma or manipulation. You function with discernment. That is not something they can quantify. So they keep assigning new individuals with different eyes and voices, hoping that someone will eventually be able to break your code and explain how someone can be so grounded while being untouchable. But the reality is, you were not designed to be deciphered. You were designed to confound the systems used to classify and govern souls. You're neither too polite nor too powerful. You are in balance. And balance is scary in an extreme-oriented society. That explains why they keep coming back. They can't believe that someone can be everything they were taught couldn't coexist. You should not be as forgiving, strong, and tranquil as you are, or as discerning and calm as you are. Dangerous to everything. False. But you are. You are a contradiction wrapped in purpose. And that is something no database, agent, or trained observer can ever truly understand. So they keep coming, only to leave with the same unsatisfied conclusion. I'm not sure who or what it was, but it's not like anything we've seen before. Number 10, they weren't expecting to be convicted by your presence. They came to observe you, not question themselves. However, the longer they remained in your company, the more uncomfortable they felt. Not because you were doing anything to them directly, but because of what your life had quietly revealed. You weren't attempting to be complete. You weren't hurling texts at them or pressuring them to become enlightened. You were just being. But the way you live, your discipline, your tranquility, and your unwillingness to settle for the superficial moved them in ways they hadn't felt in a long time. Conviction. They began off confident and detached. It was simply another assignment. Just another individual to follow. Monitor. Dissect. They did, however, observe your consistency from day to day. You were not putting on a show. You did not behave one way in public and another behind closed doors. You handled yourself with dignity even when no one was watching. That shook them. It made them consider their own compromises. They take shortcuts, excuse their actions, and wear masks simply to get through the day. They began comparing how you react to turmoil to how they crumble into it. The way you treat others with respect, even if they don't deserve it, while secretly carrying anger, ego, and jealousy in their hearts. You did not call them out. You did not point fingers. However, your composure made their agitation louder. Your attention made their distraction more clear. Your sincerity made their fakery insufferable. And then it struck them. You were not looking for praise, affirmation, or control. You were living on assignment. That kind of insight causes individuals to reassess their whole lives. It was not about you being flawless. It was about how your alignment made their justifications seem petty. You demonstrated that peace is achievable, completeness is genuine, and spiritual power does not come from pretense. It comes from surviving and being pure notwithstanding. And when they returned to report, they couldn't just talk about your conduct. They were too preoccupied with their own issues since you didn't just confront the system. You challenged their soul, and they were unprepared for it. They observed how others mistreated you, but couldn't figure out why you were still alive. They paid careful attention. They saw the maltreatment in real time, the subtle barbs, the backhanded compliments, and the unexpected betrayals from individuals you once trusted. They saw how family members grew cold, how relationships changed, how possibilities were stifled, and how doors closed without warning. They even chronicled how others went out of their way to isolate and disparage you, gradually wearing you down. And by all rational standards, you should have broken already. Most folks would have. The degree of emotional warfare you experienced wasn't typical. It was deliberate, repeated, and brutal. They kept track of how frequently you were missed when you deserved to be recognized, how often you were blamed for things you didn't do, and how often others projected their own problems onto you before walking away as if nothing had occurred. It did not make sense how you continued going. You did not even retaliate. You simply continued advancing quietly, regularly, and gracefully. They couldn't compute. They anticipated to witness symptoms of breakdown, emotional instability, public outbursts, and a spiral of resentment. But what they discovered was someone who kept anchored. You were meant to lose yourself in all of it. Instead, you discovered greater clarity and power. They kept thinking, nobody goes through that much without losing their mind. And yet, there you were, entire and exalted, smiling without fake it, healing without asking for apologies, growing without seeking vengeance. It became frustrating for them to witness since the data did not correspond to the result. They had receipts for everything you went through. There was no logical explanation for your calm, resilience, or brightness to remain so intact. And when you kept coming up with love in your heart and fire in your soul, people knew you weren't simply surviving. You were transcendent. That's when the bewilderment shifted into something else. Respect combined with dread. You were not frail. You were not naive. You were formed, honed under pressure, sharpened by betrayal, and fortified in quiet. As a result, you were a live contradiction to their preconceived notions about human endurance. They could not understand your mental steadiness. They couldn't describe your emotional state. And they certainly couldn't explain your spiritual radiance. As a result, you were unique among them. A case study. They were unable to shut a soul. They could not dissect a survivor. They couldn't grasp the number. They wanted data. But we ended up with revelation. They arrived with a job. Collect data, examine your behavior, and gather intelligence. They expected someone to observe someone with habits in order to record routines, identify faults, and reveal them. However, as soon as they entered your area, things began to alter in ways they could not describe. It was no longer simply about getting information. Something about your presence tripped their internal circuitry. They did not expect to feel anything, yet they did intensely. The energy around you was not passive. It was awakening. Just being near you evoked memories they had hidden for years. Childhood recollections, ancient hurts, and abandoned callings. They couldn't sleep like they used to, couldn't shake certain thoughts, and couldn't ignore the burden that had settled on their conscience. Some of them began to have weird dreams, vivid, meaningful, otherworldly nightmares that seemed more like messages than random visuals. They were receiving downloads, and you didn't say anything. The more they remained with you, the more they began to doubt everything, including their values, career, and identity. You did not preach to them. You did not provide them any spiritual books. However, the manner you moved, the frequency you carried affected their internal system. It was like being close to a power source, causing all of the dead objects within to buzz. Some of them panicked. Some became inquisitive. Others were mute in order to cope with the situation. What they expected to be a mission of observation transformed into a personal experience with something spiritual. You did not just live a life. You lived a truth that sparked truth in others. For some, it was too much. They were unable to manage the shift. They vanished before completing the mission. Others returned, transformed, softer and more reflective. I am no longer looking at you as a topic, but as a mirror, one they did not expect to discover. Because while gathering knowledge, they came upon revelation. They sought facts, yet they left with faith-related questions. They wanted patterns. They did, however, find a purpose. And that's when it became evident you weren't just being watched. You were divinely positioned to awaken something that data alone could never do. A number. They are all whispering the same thing behind closed doors. Leave that one alone. Conversations behind closed doors have evolved. What began as confident casual debriefs, sarcastic remarks, and cocky forecasts has evolved into silent worry. They do not mention it on record. They do not put it in writing. But everyone knows now. Something about following you comes with a cost, which they are unwilling to continue paying. At first, they assumed you were simply another individual in the system with the same assignment. But patterns began to appear. Those assigned to keep an eye on you started to experience weird interruptions one after another. The technology malfunctioned in your presence. Their personal relationships deteriorated. Health issues arose. Financial breakdowns, sleeplessness, and nightmares. But none of it made sense. You didn't do anything to them. Not directly. However, your energy included something reactive, as if it initiated heavenly cause and effect. Some of them attempted to dismiss it, but too many coincidences added up. When someone started burrowing too deeply into your life, everything began to crumble around them. It became evident that you weren't just living under heavenly protection. You got ridiculed. Anyone who mistreated the mark paid the price in unexpected ways. Now, the folks who were formerly eager to spy on you are advising the new ones not to go too near. It's unsaid but significant. A silent reverence steeped in terror, since they've seen what happens to those who try to disrupt your life, past, or serenity. It is not limited to physical implications. It's vibrant and spiritual. They wake up exhausted, lose concentration, their luck changes, and their lucidity fades. The sole common denominator is you. You did not seek for vengeance. You did not clap back. You did not even acknowledge them. And the reaction stung more because you weren't defending yourself. It was something surrounding you, something higher, something they couldn't reach or influence. So now, when your name is spoken in rooms you aren't even aware of, there's a pause, a hesitation, and someone always says it quietly and seriously. Please leave that one alone. Not out of love or pity, but because they've learned the hard way that meddling with a chosen one is not just dangerous. It is risky. A number. They found out you weren't hiding. You were protected. They mistook your silence for fear, believing that it indicated that you were hiding something nefarious. They felt your low-profile lifestyle was due to guilt, shame, or secret. This is how their world operates. People hide because they are afraid, have done something wrong, or are seeking to avoid penalties. But in your situation, their assumptions were completely incorrect. You were not concealing. You were being concealed tactically, spiritually, and purposefully. They failed to see that your absence from the limelight was not a weakness. It was a layer of protection, divine and exact. Not everyone was supposed to see you early. Not everyone was supposed to have access to you while you were still developing. You were not avoiding attention because you couldn't handle it. You were merely working on a separate time frame, one who does not react to excessive drama or affirmation. While others sought notoriety, you were being honed behind the scenes, not because you were weak, but because the weight of your vocation required it. And it's beginning to show not just in how you walk, but also in what you don't touch. They've noted that things that should have killed you did not, and things that should have destroyed you failed. People who attempted to ruin you ultimately exposed themselves. That is not luck. That's not a coincidence. That is coverage. And the more they watch it, the more uneasy they get. You move with clarity that disturbs others who rely on turmoil. You don't hurry or compete. You do not beg to be noticed. And somehow, your impact continues to expand. You are not moving in fear. You're on the right track. And this worries them because they see you're not unconcerned since you appear distant. You're not bothered because you're guarded. Not by force, but by favor. The most distressing thing for them is realizing that no amount of watching, manipulating, or interfering will work since you weren't concealed on purpose.